Welcome back to TLDR's daily briefing for Thursday, the 27th of February 2025. In today's episode, we cover Austria's new government, Andrew Tate's flight to the US, and the Gaza ceasefire. But first, a potential end to the Turkey-Kurdish conflict. After a 40-year insurgency against the Turkish state, the imprisoned leader of the Kurdistan Workers' Party, or PKK, has called on the militant group to lay down its arms and dissolve itself, and to seek a political resolution. It's a high-stakes potential turning point in the long-running conflict that has claimed nearly 40,000 lives, and could have significant implications beyond Turkey's borders, particularly in neighbouring Syria and Iraq. Abdullah Öcalan, who founded and has led the group since its formation in the late 1970s, made the call to action through a written statement, read aloud by members of Turkey's main pro-Kurdish political party who had just visited him in prison. Öcalan was quoted as saying, "The need for a democratic society is inevitable," and that the PKK's insurgency had been primarily inspired by the fact that the channels of democratic politics were dissolved. He declared, "All groups must lay down their arms, and the PKK must dissolve itself." Öcalan has been imprisoned since 1999, serving a life sentence in near-total isolation, with only rare communication with the outside world. Previous attempts at ending the conflict, which began in 1984, have failed, with a 2-year ceasefire between the PKK and the Turkish government collapsing in 2015, ushering in a deadly new phase in the conflict. This latest push for peace seemed to begin in earnest towards the end of last year, when a nationalist ally of Turkey's President Erdogan suggested that Öcalan could be offered parole if the PKK laid down its arms. Since December, Öcalan has twice been visited in prison by lawmakers from the pro-Kurdish People's Equality and Democracy Party, or DEM. Exactly what happens next, though, remains unclear. Öcalan has remained an influential figure in the Kurdish world while behind bars. However, it will be a test of his authority as to whether the group's factions and tens of thousands of fighters will actually disarm. A lot would presumably depend on what the Turkish government has offered in exchange, which is not public knowledge. Öcalan's call will be heard beyond Turkey's borders, not least in northeastern Syria, where a significant chunk of territory is controlled by Kurdish forces. The Kurdish-led Syrian Democratic Forces, or SDF, backed for years by the US against the Islamic State, are currently in talks with the new Syrian government over control of northeastern Syria and potential integration into the national army. You're listening to TLDR's Daily Briefing. If you want more explainers on what's happening in the world, then you should check out TLDR's YouTube channels. Today, we released videos on Israeli airstrikes in Syria, Turkey's support for Ukraine, and Reform UK's polling surge. You can find those videos linked in the description or the show notes for this episode, or by searching for TLDR on YouTube. Over to Europe now, where Austria's mainstream parties have agreed to form a coalition government, excluding the far-right Freedom Party, or FPO, which won most of the votes in last September's election. The negotiations followed failed attempts by the FPO to form a government due to policy differences with the Conservative People's Party. The government, Austria's first three-party coalition since the 1940s, which includes the second-placed People's Party, third-placed centre-left Social Democrats, and fourth-placed Liberal NEOS, could take office next week, depending on a vote among the members of the NEOS party. The FPO's leader, Herbert Kickl, dismissed the incoming government as a coalition of losers. Andrew Tate, the social media personality popular in alt-right spaces and the so-called manosphere, and his brother Tristan Tate have left Romania for Florida on a private jet, after prosecutors lifted a travel ban on the brothers. The pair are currently under investigation for rape, human trafficking, and money laundering in Romania, charges which they deny, and are also facing extradition to the UK, over separate sexual offences and trafficking charges, which they also deny. Romania's Prime Minister previously denied being pressured by the US government to allow the brothers to travel, whilst Romanian authorities say they accepted a request from the Tates to be able to leave the country, but insist that the brothers are still under investigation and that the cases against them have not been dropped. Moving now to Gaza, where Hamas has said that it is ready for talks on a second phase of the Gaza ceasefire deal, after Israel freed around 600 Palestinian prisoners in Israel, in exchange for the bodies of 4 hostages, completing the first phase of a fragile truce. Most of the released Palestinians were detainees returned to Gaza, where they had been rounded up after the October 7th attack that triggered the war, and had been held without charge on security suspicions. Negotiations for the second phase, in which Hamas would release dozens of remaining hostages in exchange for more prisoners and a lasting ceasefire, were scheduled to start in early February. However, Israel has insisted it will not proceed with a deal if Hamas remains in power. That's all for today. We'll be back with you tomorrow, so make sure you're subscribed wherever you listen. In the meantime, you can check out the latest episode of our podcast, The World Leader Leaderboard, where we discuss which heads of government are doing well and who's doing badly every week. You can find the link to the episode in the podcast description. This was a TLDR news production hosted by Georgina Findlay, written by Rory Taylor and Nadja Lovadinov, and produced by Scarlett Watchorn. Thanks for listening, and we'll be back again tomorrow.